والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. صلوا على رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد صلاة تفتح لنا أبواب الرضا والتيسير وتغلق بها عنا أبواب الشر والتعسير. أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وقوت الأرواح وغذائها وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Surah Ali Imran first, there's two verbs that are very similar to each other in the Quran, نزل and أنزل. I've mentioned it before. إيش الفرق بين نزل وأنزل? Do you know? نزل versus أنزل. إنا أنزلناه إنا نزلناه. Ibrahim, what is it? أنزلناه, right? إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر, right? Yeah, إنا أنزلناه. So what's the difference between نزل القرآن and أنزل القرآن? نزل is مبالغة للتكثير. It's to emphasize. Whenever Allah uses the word نزل, it's for intensification in that context. أنزل, it's not as intense, and it's as though it's quick. It's as though it's quick. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر. Just one night, subhanallah. So that's the difference between نزل and أنزل. Some people say نزل means that it was sent gradually, but that's not an accurate representation. Perhaps some ayat could have that, but that's why they say نزل عليك الكتاب بالحق وأنزل التوراة. He did inzal of Torah and Injil. They say Torah and Injil came down at, but that's not accurate. Because the ulama, the mufassirun that were actually really, really well researched in the previous scriptures, they say they did research on this and they came to the conclusion that even the previous scriptures, they were sent over time. They were not sent all at once. So this is a misconception that many people have. And if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam مع كمال عقله sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with how he was the most intelligent of the prophets, if he needed the Quran to be sent over a period of time, then what about the other prophets? You don't think Musa needs it over time? You don't think the other prophets would need it over time? فهكذا. So نزل and أنزل, that's the difference. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit from Al-Imam al-Nawawi and to shower him with his mercy, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Another question. Question time. We always read Kahf. But what does Kahf mean? Kahf is not, I discussed this in my Fajr halaqah, mentioning it to you all, because Surah Al-Kahf, everyone knows this. This was Fa'ida Jadida alayya, this was new to me as well. A small cave, we call it Ghar. Ghar Hira, Ghar Thawr, different. There's a small caves. If you've ever been, they're like small slits. A large cave, that's called a Kahf. So when you say Kahf, it's not just a small cave, it's a large cave. If it's a small cave, it's called غار. And a big one, a large one, كهف. هذا هو الفرق بين الغار والكهف. المهم, the topic of today is about a moody sheikh. Studying with a moody sheikh, that's what the title heading is. The title headings are not from Imam al-Nawawi, okay? They're from the translator who added it in, okay? Among the things the student is advised to heed is that he not recite to the shaykh while the shaykh's heart is preoccupied or bored, or while he is reluctant, distressed, overjoyed, hungry, thirsty, tired, troubled, or anything that makes it difficult for him or prevents him from having complete presence of heart or from him being energetic. The student should take full advantage of the times in which the teacher is energetic. I mean, human nature, we're not always going to be 100%. Sometimes because of problems that we might have, the tire gets flat. Maybe, the boss is yelling at you at home. Different problems come up, And so when problems come up, the battery gets low. So sometimes people are not always fully there. So you have to understand and deal with people. Shuyukh and teachers, they're also human beings. So you also have to keep that in mind. Sometimes they won't always be there, fully present. So some of the Salaf, there's stories that sometimes, some of them, they would wait an entire year to be able to look for that most appropriate time for their questions. Can you imagine waiting 1 year for one mas'ala? You see the person, but they're preoccupied and you're just waiting because you're waiting for the right time. There's a famous statement of Abu Hanifa. He said, and I don't remember the exact quote by verbatim, but he says, "Do not ask me when I am walking. Because when a person is walking, his thoughts are, do not ask me when I'm relaxing. Do not ask me while I'm eating. Do not ask me while I'm doing this. Do not ask me while I'm doing this. Meaning that find the best and the most appropriate time to ask the question. It's funny, I love questions because it shows that people are actually engaging in Islam and they want to learn. So in fact, nowadays I actually encourage, ask, go ahead, don't worry. And then we'll figure out the questions later. I remember I went kayaking and someone was asking while we went kayaking as the trip, they were saying, Sheikh, what's the fatwa on this? What's the fatwa on this? I said, subhanallah. And I was remembering the quote of Abu Hanifa, do not ask me while I'm kayaking. So that's something to consider. There's actually, I think it's a narration, لا يقضي القاضي وهو غضبان. A person who is a judge, he should not give the ruling when he himself is angry. Why? Because then his emotions they definitely will change his decision. Same thing, لا يقضي القاضي, and he is جوعان. If you're hungry, we all know there's something called hunger. Okay? So when a person is hungry or sleepy or this, that, you know that they're fully not there. So you need to find, especially with the shaykh, the most appropriate time to be able to ask him questions. Then he says, the student's etiquette includes bearing with the shaykh's coarseness and harshness. This doesn't mean that it's acceptable from the shaykh, but the student himself, when you deal with teachers, alhamdulillah, I've had many teachers, and I'm telling you, some of them were so harsh that the insults that they told me or the things that they told me, it like left scar tissue. Really, because of sometimes, I'm sure you've all experienced that as well, that from your Ustad Ji, he says something that just penetrates you so deep that you lose sleep over it. Okay? Imam al-Nawawi, he says that the student, his etiquette includes bearing. He should have sabr with the shaykh's coarseness and bad aspects of his character, and not being dissuaded from remaining with him and believing in his aptness. The student gives valid excuses for his shaykh's actions and utterances that outwardly seem flawed. Who is incapable of this, not able to give his teacher excuses, except for someone with no tawfiq, little or no tawfiq. The reality is, if you want to be a student and you want to learn, you're going to have to humble yourself. There's something that the teacher has that you need and you want, that unless you're patient with him, then that's the only way to achieve it. You know, they say, I mentioned this in the dars about marriage. I said, when you're looking for a wife, you cannot find 100%. Just like you and I are not 100%. You want beauty, you want wealth, you want family, you want this, you want this, you want this. Who are you? What are you bringing in the first place? You know, one of my, it's so funny, in one of our classes, one of the classmates, the shaykh was giving him advice. And he mentioned the example of Rasulullah ﷺ with Aisha. And then the student, he replied, he said, Shaykh, but you cannot compare our wives to Aisha. And then the shaykh said, do you think you're a Rasulullah or something like that? So we shouldn't expect, there's no mafi insan, there is no human being that's 100%. If someone is 70%, 60%, 80%, they have 100 good things and they might have 8 mistakes, 9 mistakes, 10 mistakes, even 1, 2, 3 mistakes. Just try to cover that up and focus on the positives. There's a line of poetry, إذا أتى الحبيب بألف إيش هو بذنب واحد جاءت محاسنه بألف شفيع. That if your beloved comes with one mistake, then the good qualities of them will come as 1,000 intercessors. So focus on the positives of the teacher rather than thinking about the harsh statements that he might have, or he singled you out in class, or he might have said something that hurt your feelings and he didn't really understand your perspective. Because sometimes, and again, he should look for excuses for his shaykh. Sometimes when a shaykh does that to me, I always say, this is a lesson in humility. This is a lesson. I need to think about what was my fault, not think about why did the shaykh say this, but what could I have done differently. And sometimes the shaykh is going to be at fault, and then you just have to have sabr. This is the path of knowledge. If the shaykh is coarse with him, he takes the initiative to apologize to the shaykh. And outwardly, he shows that the offense is his, and he deserves the reprimand. Like, forgive me, shaykh, samihni, ana ghaltan, I made the mistake, can you please forgive me? That's the student-teacher relationship. Student-teacher relationship, and also children-to-parent relationship. That you should assume that what your parents did, they might be at fault. No human being is perfect. Our parents aren't perfect, but we should always assume that the fault is in us. How can I do better? What mistake did I make? What lesson can I take from it? This is from the humility that students should have with their teachers and even children should have with their parents. This is more beneficial for him in this world and the next, and purer for the heart of the shaykh. Because if he finds that the student is not being patient with him, or let's say that he makes a mistake, the teacher knows, later on he figures it out that he made a mistake, and he knows that his student didn't say anything and he was just patient, how much the respect the teacher will have for the student will be elevated. That, subhanAllah, even though I was harsh with him, look how patient he was with me. And this is some realization that sometimes even teachers have. Like I said, they're human beings. Usually teachers, shuyukh, they're sleeping very little. I can speak for myself, sleeping very little, okay? And ulama, they barely sleep. And then majority of their time, do you think they're spending it amongst people and relaxation and vacation time and watching TV? No, studying, research, books, studying, research, books. Someone who does that all the time, kind of they become a little bit harsh. They become a little bit harsh. So be patient. Realize that maybe his background, maybe the cultural differences, maybe the fact that he's tired. It could be anything. Maybe he has some stresses, some financial stresses. Only Allah knows. Maybe some health issues, some family issues. So just be forgiving. And there's some statements by some of the Salaf. It has been said, whoever is impatient with the humiliation of learning will spend his life in the blindness of ignorance. And whoever is patient with it will eventually lead to the glory of this life and the next. Be patient now, take the humility, be humble, and then as you grow, you'll see that Allah will give you izzah. But if you're not patient in the early stage of then facing that sometimes the humiliation, even the humbling moments of studying, then how will you ever become a great scholar? بَلْ لَمْ تَكُنْ لَهُ بِدَايَةٌ مُحْرِقَةٌ لَنْ تَكُونَ لَهُ نِهَايَةٌ مُشْرِقَةٌ. Whoever doesn't have a really tough beginning, a burning beginning, then how do you think he's going to glow and be like the sun and be a light for others later? The student's etiquette encompasses the famous statement from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Say radiallahu anhu. He says, ذَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا فَعَزَزْتُ مَطْلُوبًا. ذَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا وَعَزَزْتُ فَعَزَزْتُ مَطْلُوبًا. He says, I was humble when I studied, so I was respected when I was sought. ذَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا. When I was a student, I was humble. And then when I was sought, عَزَزْتُ. That's when I was respected. So that's the path of a student of knowledge. I was humble when I studied, so I was respected when I was sought. How excellent is the one who said, whoever does not experience the taste of humility for an hour, he will spend an eternity humiliated. Every student of knowledge, every person who begins the path of learning anything, they always begin as a fool. Unless you're able to accept that when I'm going in to learn something, this is completely new to me, and you're not able to go through that stage of just not knowing anything and being a fool in that sense, then you'll never excel. You'll never become that great person that you would want to aspire to be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-dhawq al-Muhammadi. This is something that we really need in our lives, al-dhawq al-Muhammadi. How Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how beautiful his character was, wallahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and how he interacted with people, how he interacted with companions, how he interacted with everyone, bil-dhawq. How could you say dhawq bil-Inglesi? Basically, the Prophet ﷺ, like a taste, but not just taste. You all understand. The Prophet ﷺ, he knew how to deal with people. Emotional intelligence, really. Emotional intelligence. We ask Allah, للذوق المحمد يا رب. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Tomorrow will be tafsir, inshallah. Tomorrow will be tafsir, بإذن الله تعالى, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.